In the 1920s, the age of the flapper had begun. Young women were looking to movie screens, magazines, newspapers, and society to find inspiration for their new-found freedoms. From those sources, there were favorites. From those favorites, and in their eyes, there was definitely the ultimate flapper of all time. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the top 10 who were idolized by these young women, as well as who the ultimate flapper is. If you want to find out who it is, keep watching. Hello and welcome to Killer Kitsch Lizzie, my weird little world where I like to knit and sew, do other crafty things, and continue with my obsession about flappers. And try to figure out who the ultimate flapper is. So in today's video, as you would have noticed from the intro, I am going to talk about several very popular flappers from the 1920s. In this video, I'm going to also just kind of tell you a little bit about each individual person. I'm not going to get into a huge in-depth video about that. I just want you to sort of have an idea of who they are, kind of why they made it to this short list, I guess. Because I did start out with a long list, quite long, and then myself narrowed it down to 10. I think it's 10. And then I took those and I went on different social media platforms and I asked for people to vote on their favorites. And I used that as a way to figure out who the ultimate flapper is. And I'm going to tell you who that is at some point in this video. Yes, I am. Anyway, I will be referring to my notes a little bit as I'm talking here, just because I haven't memorized anything. I'm now going to talk about the women that made it to the short list. There's 10 of them. So I believe there's 10. So those women are Clara Bow, Louise Brooks, Colleen Moore, Josephine Baker, Joan Crawford, Olive Thomas, Anita Loos, Zelda Fitzgerald, Lois Long, and May Wong. And they were very iconic of that time for not only, having that flapper aura and attitude and style. They were in a lot of movies or not a lot, but they were in movies considered to be flapper movies. So that's how they made it to the short list. I think I initially had around 30-ish actresses on the list. And that was a combination of socialites, reporters, writers, models that of that time were a huge influence on flapper culture. And I had thought about doing all 30-ish of them in a video, but that was going to be like a crazy long video, and I don't think anyone would appreciate that. At some point, I might do a second video just sort of talking about the women that didn't make it to the short list, because some of them are still of interest, so that is a possible video in the future. Now, of the short list, some names immediately, when you see them, you're going to recognize them. Right off the bat, you're going to know exactly who they are. There are going to be a few names on there that, unless you are into silent film or the 1920s culture, you're not going to recognize them. But that said, they are on the list because now I knew who they were. I know who they are because I have studied the 1920s since I was a child. But I think it's important that you know who they are as well, and you'll understand when I talk about them why they're on this list. Now, it was really hard for me to whittle down from the 30-something to the final 10. There were a lot of amazing women on that list, but I couldn't have a list that long. As I just mentioned, the video would have been just crazy. So, what I'm going to do now is I am going to actually talk a little bit about each individual woman before I tell you who won. And also, if there is anyone on this list that you would like a full-length video done, let me know. I already have planned one on Clara Bow and Louise Brooks for the future. So, yeah, honestly, if there's anyone else on that list that you're really interested in learning more, please, I am more than happy to talk about them. I am obsessed with the 1920s and could go on forever. So, this list is not in any particular order at all. So do not assume that when you see this list or you hear me talk about this list that, you know, who is going to be the winner. So this is not in a particular list, order at all. So from here, I'm going to be looking more at my notes for this. So number 1 on my list is Clara Bow. The first one I'm going to talk about. Named The It Girl by British writer Eleanor Glyn, Clara Bow was a true rags to riches Hollywood story. Clara Bow won a photo beauty contest that helped launch her movie career. What truly launched her career, though, was the movie It. It was made in 1927, a year that would probably, in everyone's opinion, if you're a movie historian, a silent film buff, would say 1920 was the best year for silent films. Some of the best were made that year. Just saying. Also, in the movie It, Eleanor Glyn has a cameo. So, Clara was incredibly popular during the silent film era. Probably one of the most popular actresses at the time, but unfortunately, when talkies started coming in at the end of the 20s, she had a problem with it. She didn't like her voice. She was worried about how she was going to sound on camera, as well as she was very distracted by, in the talkies, the microphones would be up above. Like now there's still boom mics and stuff, but in a lot more like movies and TV and stuff, you're wearing a mic, a pack on your body. Again, there's still overhead mic booms and stuff, but she was always very distracted by what was going on up here, and it really annoyed cameramen and the directors and stuff. So once the talkies came about, she did less movies. Silent film, she was working all the time, like nonstop. Most actresses were. They worked them almost to death, to be honest. But also not working as much because of how stressed out she was also part of her downfall. And also, I'm going to mention Clara Bow her name vanished, if you know what I mean. Like, people didn't recognize her name anymore, and then when silent films became popular again, people started to learn more about Clara Bow again. And it's unfortunate that had that not become a thing again, where silent films became popular again, we might not have discovered who Clara was. And it's too bad. So another thing that happened with her is because she was overworked and underpaid, something I've talked about before, lots of actresses were not getting paid properly. If you go back and watch my Myrna Loy video, I talk about that a bit. So that exhaustion really taxed her mental health. And also on top of that, through her entire career, she had to deal with a lot of scandals. and rumors that were not true. And I'm not going to get into them in this video. I will talk a little bit more about all that stuff when I do a video on just her. So because of that, she was kind of not wanting to do movies anymore. But at age 26, she met and married Rex Bell, who was another silent film actor. He did a lot of westerns. And then at the age of 28, she retired from acting, moved to his ranch. She was done. So throughout her career, she made 58 films from 1922 to 1933, and you know, the 30s was the talkies. Yeah, and as I just mentioned, she just disappeared into obscurity, and then with renewed interest in silent film, silent cinema, that's where she was rediscovered. So some of the better known movies that she did in the 1920s was The Plastic Age, 1925, Our Lady of Whim, 1925, Man Trap, 1926, and Wings, 1927. Next up, Louise Brooks. And I think everybody knows her because of her iconic haircut, which I was just talking on Friday with my father-in-law about this. Like we were talking about silent cinema, and he said, you know, the one that's always stood out to him is Louise Brooks because of her haircut. Nicknamed Lulu, Louise Brooks is regarded today as an iconic flapper. This is mostly due to her bobbed hairstyle. And then when that became popular, many other actresses started copying that haircut. As many silent film actresses' careers began, Louise Brooks started out as a dancer at the age of 15. She would eventually find her way to the Ziegfeld Follies, and then Louise Brooks would catch the attention of producer Walter Wagner. He then signed her to a 5-year contract at Paramount Pictures, and after working in Hollywood for a number of years, she became very disheartened with the role she was getting. Also, that was happening to Myrna Loy. A lot of other actresses, right? In 1929, she moved to Germany, and her career finally took off the way she was expecting it to when she was in Hollywood. In 1929, she starred in Pandora's Box and Diary of a Lost Girl, and those were both directed by G.W. Pabst. He's also a very iconic director of the time. In 1938, Louise decided to retire from the movies. At that point, she'd made a total of 25 of them. Unfortunately, similar to Clara Bow, she did fall into obscurity. However, in the 1950s, her movies were rediscovered, and she came back into popularity. Now, Clara did a little bit, but Louise Brooks definitely struggled financially. I think when her movies got rediscovered, it helped her out a bit. Like, she was able to find streams of income. But she never went back to acting. She was done. And then in 1982, she wrote her memoir called Lulu in Hollywood. I have a copy of it somewhere in our home. I cannot find it. I don't think I lent it out to anybody. I need to find it. If I do, I'll pop it in. It's a fun read because she doesn't hold back. If you can find a copy of it, read it. Some of her movies from the 1920s were Beggars of Life in 1928, Pandora's Box 1929, and Diary of a Lost Girl in 1929 again. Next is Colleen Moore. Now, this may or may not be a name you recognize. Look her up. She's amazing. Anyways, you'll find out a little bit more of her here in a second. Colleen Moore was not only one of the most fashionable actresses of the time, she was also the highest paid, which is a little unusual considering what the other actresses were going through. Similar to Louise Brooks, many young women would shape their appearance after her. This woman was stunning. Colleen did attempt to do talkies, but for her, none of those movies were actually financially successful at all. Her silent movies were super successful financially, and for the studios, but her talkies were not. When talkies came about, there were a lot of new actresses on the scene that gained popularity immediately, and that was sort of another thing that hurt some silent film actresses, was their popularity just started to wane, where younger new actresses, became super popular almost overnight in some cases. So because of that, she decided to just retire from acting. She was done. But unlike Clara and Louise, she was very clever, very smart with her money. She she invested her money very, very well, and for the rest of her life, she was very financially stable. Sadly, just like Theda Bara, almost all of her movies are considered lost, and that includes her first talkie. There are just so many movies from the silent film era that are just gone. And I've said this over and over again, I really hope one day somebody will find them. Or they're not going to find all of them, because some of them might be destroyed because of the type of material used for film, but I hope somebody digs up a house somewhere and just finds a whole bunch of them. Or a garage, or a barn. One day. Anyway, some of her movies from the 1920s were The Wallflower, 1922, Broken Hearts of Broadway, 1923, and Flaming Youth, also 1923. Probably one of my ultimate favorite actresses from the silent film. Not just actress. She did way more than that. Josephine Baker. Singer, dancer, actress, civil rights activist, and French resistance agent. Like, this woman did it all. Josephine Baker had one of the more interesting lives of all of the silent film actresses and all of the talkie actresses, the early talkies. She was bold, brave, and sassy. She was also incredibly driven and knew exactly what she wanted and worked incredibly hard to achieve her goals. And she would not back down when she wanted something. And she also knew when to walk away from things. She knew when to fight for new opportunities. Her spirit was incredible. You didn't mess with this woman. When her career was not going the way she had planned when she was in the United States, she moved to France. And when she got to Paris, they loved her. She discovered how beloved she really was when she got there, and how much Hollywood was not appreciating her. Paris opened her with open arms. Like, she was immediately, her stardom shot up immediately, and she finally was getting the accolades, and she was finally getting the accolades she deserved. In 1956, she retired from stage, but would continue to remain in the spotlight for her civil rights work. And please read up about that. It is a very important part of her history, and considering everything that's happening today, please go read it. It will empower you. Some of her movies in the 20s were La Siren, I'm gonna say this wrong, La Siren des Tropiques from 1927, La Revue des Revues, and La Navre Aveugle, I think. I'm Canadian, and my French should be way better than it is, and it's not. From 1920, both of those were from 1927. Next on the list, might be a little surprise to some people because she is more well known for noir, but Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford had a very long and illustrious career, if not sometimes scandalous. She was another actress similar to Clara Bow who had to deal with a lot of rumors and scandal, and a lot of it wasn't true. And I've actually gotten into arguments with people who try to like insist, do your research before you believe any of it, please. With any kind of misinformation, please do your research. Today, she's more well known for her pre-code roles, and of course, in her noir movies, and of course, her adopted daughter's book about her called Mommy Dearest. There is also a movie starring Faye Dunaway. Don't watch it. It's horrible. Sadly, and it also kind of fuels those rumor fires. Just don't watch it. And sadly, many are not aware of her amazing silent film career because they know her mostly from pre-code in the 40s, like the noir and stuff. And then later her television appearances. But and also her look changes a lot from the 1920s to when we see her later. It's crazy what makeup can do with how much it can change your appearance, right? But she was an iconic silent film star. She was also an iconic flapper. Everything about her screamed flapper, and a lot of young women idolized and looked up to her. So similar to actresses starting their careers, Joan was an incredible dancer. This talent helped her land her first film role. She was also had iconic style during the 1920s. I'm going to show a little bit of that with all these actresses. You're going to see clips of them. And it also very iconic flapper style. Some of her movies from the 1920s were Taxi Dancer in 1927, The Unknown in 1927, which we recently, actually might have been about a year ago, saw on the big screen, accompanied with live music. So good. Thank you, Silent Review in Toronto. And Our Dancing Daughters from 1928. There is a sequel to that. I don't remember when the sequel comes out. I think it's a talkie, though, like a sound film, if I remember. Next up, Olive Thomas. Again, a name you're probably not going to recognize, but she is very important to the whole flapper movement. Often referred to as the original flapper, Olive Thomas helped to mold the beginnings of what a flapper would be. In 1920, she starred in a movie called The Flapper. Olive's career started around the same time that silent cinema had its beginnings as well. Unfortunately, she did not have a long career. She was incredibly talented and had this unfortunate thing happen, which I'm about to tell you. If it hadn't happened, she would have had a very long career, and I think she would have done well in the talkies as well. So, unfortunately, she passed away at the age 25. There is some scandal around it, like around the circumstances leading up to her death. So if you want to know more about that, as well as Olive Thomas, let me know. Happy to do a video about that. Some of her better known movies were Heiress for a Day, 1918, The Glorious Lady, 1919, and of course, The Flapper from 1920. This next person, you might, if you're a fan of movies from the 50s, especially Marilyn Monroe, you may recognize this name, Anita Loos. Anita was an American actress, novelist, playwright, and screenwriter. Anita famously became known for being the first staff screenwriter for D.W. Griffith. That was a huge career boost for her. Anyone that worked with him, their careers did pretty well. However, she's actually best known for her novel that was written or published in 1925 called Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Now, most of you are going to be familiar with the Marilyn Monroe version of this. There was a silent version made in 1928. Unfortunately, it's a lost movie. I know. I keep bringing up lost movies. You might be thinking because she was a writer, she might not have been photographed that much or seen that much in public. However, she was. And her own personal style, her own personal flapper style was, again, a style that a lot of young women looked up, copied that style, right? Her hair, her dress, the way she dressed and all that. So if you'll see in some of the photos what her style was, and you'll see also she's the iconic haircut, right? Anita continued to write very popular movies up until the 60s, such as Red-Headed Woman, Saratoga, Another Thin Man, and the sequel to Gentlemen Prefer Blondes called Gentlemen Prefer Brunettes, and I don't think I've actually seen that one. I'm pretty sure I haven't. So the next woman on the list is Zelda Fitzgerald. Now, she's probably better known as being the wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald, and there are a few television series in recent years that delve into who she was. Zelda was one of them. It starred Christina Ricci. I don't remember where it was, if it was on Prime or Netflix. It was on a streaming series somewhere. It only ended up being one series, or like one season. It never continued on, which was really upsetting because it was a really good series and I wanted more of it. But she's more well known for being his wife, as well as the tragedy around her life. But she had a very important writing career, and also there is a wee bit of scandal about whether or not she wrote some or all of F. Scott Fitzgerald's work, like his short stories, novellas, and all that. And the reason for that is years down the road, she wrote a novel that was sent to a publisher, and that publisher was thinking, this looks a lot like the writing style and the content is very similar to what F. Scott Fitzgerald used to write. So that is where some of that scandal began. And, in some of the films and television series about her, that comes up. So Zelda was the ultimate flapper, the wardrobe, her attitude, the parties, and the way she carried herself. On the movie screen, we've seen, again, many actresses represent her. In real life, she was definitely what other people in her social circle would style themselves against. Now, she wasn't in any movies, so I don't have any movies to list here, as well as the next person I'm about to talk about. Louise Long. And she is a woman after my own heart. So was Zelda, actually. As a writer, both Lois and, I think I might have just said Lois Long, not Louise. Zelda and Lois were both writers. As well as Anita Loos, right? As someone who's a writer herself, they pull at my heartstrings. Lois Long was a 20-something writer who embodied the flapper lifestyle better than anyone. Writing under the pseudonym Lipstick, in her wildly popular column, Tables for Two, she spent her nights reviewing nightclubs for The New Yorker. Lois was living every young flapper's dream, a career, spending her evenings in jazz clubs, speakeasies, the extravagant wardrobe. Through her column, she was able to give these young women a glimpse into the glamour of the 1920s and New York City. And if you go back and watch my video prior to this, like a few videos back, called The Rebellious Women in the 1920s, I talk a lot about them wanting to embrace the glamour of the 1920s. So I have included, I'll put it in the show notes below as well as over on Patreon, a link to the column. Well, it's one of the excerpts, or one of the columns. It's not the entire column. I think if you go to the New Yorker archive, you'll be able to find more of them. And last but not least, and I would never leave her off this list, no matter how many times I shortlisted this or, edited it down, pared it down, May Wong. May Wong was an American actress considered to be the first Chinese-American film star in Hollywood, as well as the first Chinese-American actress to gain any international recognition. May had a long career beginning in silent cinema, then moving on to sound, television, stage, and radio. Something that a lot of silent film actresses, they didn't actually move past silent movie, or maybe they did some sound films, but Joan Crawford is an example of somebody who, like May, their career, encompassed all of that. They were able to continue to work. When she started out in silent movies, she mostly played bit parts. The movie The Toll of the Sea proved her talent, and this helped her to be able to move into bigger roles. Though it was never to the level of other actresses of the time, unfortunately. May decided, and we've heard this before a few times, May decided to move to the UK to work, and very similar to Josephine Baker, the UK film industry, arms wide open, they showed great appreciation for her talent. Eventually, she then moved to Germany, and when she did, her stardom skyrocketed even more. Some of the movies that she was in the 1920s were The Toll of the Sea from 1922, 40 Winks, 1925, Fifth Avenue, 1926, and Mr. Wu in 1927. I know there's some of her stuff on YouTube. Definitely, if you can see it on the big screen, hopefully you have similar events like we have here, or series, like we have the Silent Review. We also have the Silent Film Festival. We have a couple of different theaters that show silent films on the regular. The Review, this is in Toronto, the Fox and the Paradise. So if you can get out, whatever city or wherever you are in the world, if you can go see silent films, do it please. Also, if you can see any of these actresses, see them, well, the ones that have movies available. And May Wong, definitely, please go see her. her work, amazing. So after we did I put everything out onto social media, we then had a three-way tie. Clara Bow, Louise Brooks, and Colleen Moore. And understandably so. A lot more people recognize Colleen Moore than I thought would. So that was good. Then I put that list out, and there was another vote, and I then ended up with a tie. And that tie could not be broken. So, the winners are, drumroll please, Clara Bow and Louise Brooks. That tie could not be broken no matter what I did, so, and rightly so, they were both amazing. And fortunately, there is quite a few of their movies out there still, so not always the best copy or the best version. Some of them are, being upscaled and upgraded through technology. We have seen some 4K versions of things in recent years. So yeah, get out there, check out all these actresses, check out all other silent movies. So, were you surprised by the results? Were you not surprised by the results? Was there anybody on this list that you didn't know? Are there people that I didn't have on this list that you personally feel should have been on it? Please let me know in the comments. I would love to know. And again, if there's anyone on this list or any other silent film actress that I have not talked about that you want to find out more in a full video, like a full-length video, please go ahead and let me know. I am super happy to do it. But if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Give me 2 thumbs up. I know you can't do that, but please subscribe. I would love to have you as part of my channel. Also, subscribing lets you know when the next video is, what the next video topic is going to be. And until next time, stay kitschy.